Welcome to the Keon Sports Podcast. Our guest today, legend from the 1980s and 90s WWF tag team scene, the Bushwackers. It is Luke Williams. Put your feet up, grab something cold to drink, sit back and relax. It's now time for the Keon Sports Podcast. Without any further ado, here is Luke Williams. Welcome back to the Keon Sports Podcast. Today, our guest, Luke Williams, of the world-famous Bushwackers. Very excited to have him. As always, I'm your host, Vince McKee, and without any further ado, let's get Luke to the phone. All right, thank you again for joining us here with Key on Sports. On the line with us today, Bushwacker Luke of, the famous Bushwackers. How are you, sir?
Well, good day, matey, and it's great to be on your show, Key on Sports. Looking forward to it, mate.
Oh, I appreciate that very much. We're happy to have you. So I wanted to start off and asking you about your tag team partner, Butch Miller. You guys had an unbelievable chemistry teaming together for all those years. Why do you feel like the chemistry was so good between the two of you?
Chemistry, I don't know. We come from a little country down under and things are different down there. In the 60s, people were very close. When you got to know somebody, you became like brothers, and that. Butch and me became like that. Even though we're cousins, or as we sold ourselves as cousins, and that we just became so close, and that, and everybody thought we were brothers because we looked similar.
Yeah, you guys were very similar. Had an unbelievable chemistry. Definitely a fan favorite. But before.
We went all those years, mate, without them. We never broke up or anything through the years. A lot of tag teams, after so many years, break up. But we were together, up till 202. That's when Butch took sick and that. And, we were together. I'm talking about together, Not that we shared the same room when we were on the road, but in the early stages we did. In the 60s and 70s and up to about 80, we on the road all the time. We shared the same hotel room and that, but so we never had any problems with each other.
That's tremendous. Now, a lot of people, everybody, wants to talk about the WWF days. Obviously, that was the biggest point of fame, was the WWF, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But before we do, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your time in the UWF. Now, the UWF had a lot of talent in it, a lot of older, legendary WWF guys as well. You and Butch were there for a bit in the UWF. What are some of your memories of working, in the UWF with Mitch Abrams or Herb Abrams, and also, really, why do you think it never really hit the big time?
No, mate, Herb Abrams didn't. The UWF was owned by the guy in down in Oklahoma, Bill Watts.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, it was ran by. Yep.
I was never with that group of Herb Abrams. I was with the big company who ran all those territories, right from New Orleans right up to St. Louis.
That's
Bill
right.
Watts ran a big area, and all the stars, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Junkyard Dog, One Man Gang, Bam Bam Bigelow, they all came. They all came from Jake the Snake, Ted DiBiase. They all went to WWF, but they all come from UWF. Bill Watts' territory.
Right, and it was an incredible company. As you said, that they traveled all down south there. Why do you think they eventually had everybody leave for the WWF?
Beg your pardon, mate?
Why do you feel like everybody left for the WWF, left the UWF for the WWF? Because it was big.
When Vince Jr. took over from his dad, he went around the country and stole all the top talent from all the major territories. That's why they all sort of closed up. By 88, there was only 88. Most of them were closed, apart from NWA, Crockett. Crockett had bought out UWF from Bill Watts, in '87, and so they were there. All the smaller territories were closed because Vince had stolen all the top talent. He actually started in Minnesota first. He went to Vern Gagne's AWA. He took Bobby Heenan, Mean Gene, Hulk Hogan, the world's strongest man, Ken Patera, Jesse Ventura. He cleaned out that place first.
Yeah, no doubt about it. National expansion for Vince Jr. is really what put the WWF on the map for good and kind of knocked everybody out. And that's what brings you guys, after 2+ decades, you guys were already in the business 2 decades, a long time, when you show up in the WWF, and you guys were villains. The Sheep Herders were nationally known as a villainous team. But when you arrived in the WWF, they turned you babyface and almost made you guys comedic, like, a funny babyface type role. Whose idea was it to turn you guys babyface, and who came up with the whole gimmick?
Well, Vince, before we went up there, we were known as Hardcore before Hardcore became a name brand. We were doing from 1980, 79, we were doing barbed wire cage matches, fire matches, boot camp matches. We were all bloody matches, and we worked a lot of them in South America too, as you know. The Latins love blood and guts. And anyhow, so when Vince called us up there, and that, believe it or not, we were in Columbus, Ohio, in the Gold's Gym, and I went out to pick up my messages on the phone. Those days, there was no cell phones. This was '88. And there was a voicemail there, and it says, please call me. Pat here, please call me. Who the hell's Pat? You know what I mean? Sure, it was Pat Patterson. Yep. So I called him, and he was in a room with Vince and that. So he put me over to Vince, and he said, "G'day Kiwis, g'day Kiwi," and he says, "Yeah, we're interested in you. Can you come? If you got time, can you come up and see us?" And that's how it all started. He told me there'd be tickets at home, and that's so anyhow we got up there and went in his office and that, and the first thing he says, introduction BS, and we're sitting at his desk, he says, "I'd like to bring you in as the good guys." And of course, Butch hopped up on his desk and put his nose about it. It wouldn't even be a foot from Vince. He says, "If you can make these faces good guys, go for it." And he says, "Well, look at my top baby faces. They haven't got the cutest mugs. Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Jake the Snake, Axel Jim Duggan." And when you look at their heads, they're not the prettiest group. And he said they haven't got the prettiest kisses. So, and of course I piped up and I said, why not bring us in as heels and turn us baby faces? And of course, you don't tell Caesar what to do. And that was the first line I learned straight away. He says, I don't do it that way. I'm going to bring you in, do 2 months of videos, or a month of videos, bring you in up every week, and we'll shoot about 4 vignettes, and then each week, and for a month, and I'll run them on all their programs, and that was it. And when we got home after that meeting with Vince, the next day, or the 2 days later, Butch calls me up. He says, "Shit, I've got a bloody contract here, but it's for the Bushwackers." And he must have sent it to the wrong people. And I says, no to Butch. He wants to own us, for merchandise sake. Yep. When he owns the name for merchandise sake, he only has to pay you what he wants to pay you. You know what I mean? 1 or 2%, 1%. If you own the name, he takes the name. Well, he has to pay you more because he's using your name.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys, when he takes them, like the Road Warriors, he changed the Legion of Doom, but he changed them to Legion of Doom. But if he takes the name, he was paying them 5% on the merchandise. On the net of the merchandise. Well, when he owns the name, he only pays you 1%. Butch and me were only getting 0.5% each on all the merchandise.
Yeah, absolutely. And then
Now, you see, how do we develop the character? Well, Vince said to us, I want you to be between the Moondogs and the Sheep Herders, because baby faces. And when we got back, Butch said to us, well, the Moondogs have been on USA Network for 5 years, and we've been on NWA Network since '79. You know, Ted Turner, he had the NWA on Turner's network, which was TBS and TNT. And Butch says, well, we've been on and off that from '79 right to '88. We were working for Ted Turner at the time, not for Ted Turner, for the Crockett's, NWA. And he said, let's think of something different. And when we were heels, the bad guys, when we went outside the ring, we always threw our arms up and at the crowd and went, whoa, yay, just to scare them. And Butch says, hey, let's turn that around. Let's swing our arms, go into the ring like marching. And I bitched straight away, and I says, my shoulders are screwed up. I can't. And he said to me, do you want to make money? And that was it. You know, and then of course the head kissing later, head licking later came on. But I always put my hand on the guy's head or the woman's head and licked the back of my hand. People wouldn't notice that because I did it so fast. But that's how we started that. And, you know, to this day, we were never remembered from our wrestling or anything like that. Well, they knew we were comical, but we were remembered from that arm, you know, the arm swinger. As Jesse Ventura would say, here comes the marching morons.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
that's how we're remembered, mate. And, you know, and I've been remembered right up to, I got a plug every year from 92 right up to 2018, you know, and the Royal Rumble. When you know, I marched out, Earthquake got me threw me out the other side. I was in the ring for maybe 15 seconds, I think, and an Earthquake threw me out the other side, and I marched back. And Vince used that all the, you know, in the pre-Royal Rumble promotion. That was seen right up to 218 every year.
Yeah, and you know, that's one of the most famous Royal Rumble moments of all time. I wanted to ask you too, when you and Butch got there, the WWF tag team scene was the best it's ever been. Everybody remembers those days with the Hart Foundation and Demolition and Strike Force, the Brain Busters, the Rougeau brothers, and obviously the Bushwhackers, on and on down the line. Why was it so good?
And we had the other two guys that you never mentioned, the Rockers, who got fired 3 times, but they were so good baby faces, and Vince loved them, you know, because they were a big fan following, that he brought them back. But he fired them 3 times, I think, before 91 or 90.
Will the tag team scene ever be that good again? I mean, that was something amazing. You guys were part of probably the greatest tag team scene of all time.
Yeah, well, our first team we were with were the Rougeaus. We were put with the Rougeaus for about 6 months.
Yep.
And that, of course, is Raymond was going to leave, so they put us over everywhere, the Rougeaus, and then around the country. And then the next team were the Russians. And this is funny, mate. We'd march out even in all the countries overseas, and everyone they would cheer for us, USA, USA. And here's 2 guys from down under, even in England, which is a British, which New Zealand is a British country, that still chime USA.
That's hilarious. Now, you know, one of the funny things you guys did, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier in the interview, some of the vignettes, you know, but really one of my favorite things growing up as a fan was the Colosseum home video tapes that they used to do. You did some of the funniest things with guys like Lord Alfred Hayes and also Mean Gene Okerlund. What was it like to work with Mean Gene Okerlund and do some of those skits?
Mate, Mean Gene was the best. I'm just going to jump forward for a second. Doing an interview with him, and if you had a dead spot or anything, Mean Gene was right there, came in and led you on, fed you more to say and put you back on the track. Mean Gene was the best, mate. You know what I mean? Especially for doing interviews and that. And whatever, you know, promos, any kind of promo. And, Mean Gene was a lot of fun. The best one was up in Arizona, up in the mountains, Tucson, when we did the Bushwacker Shack and we did Bushwacker Buzzing, and Mean Gene turned into a Bushwacker.
Yep.
We had an old grill and that old shack up in the hills. That was one of the best.
Oh.
I still laugh at that. Mean Gene knew, he knew how to work into these things. He was great. And Lord Alfred Hayes, God bless him. Oh, God bless them both. But Alfred Hayes was great too, mate. I remember doing the electrical one. We were doing home improvements, and we went in the wall and hit an electrical cord. and of course, Lord Alfred, showed that he was getting electrical shock because they sped it up in the video. It was so funny.
Oh, it's one of the all-time best. Fans out there, I want to encourage you to go watch it on Colosseum Home Video. It's also on the WWE Network. It's called Smack 'em, Whack 'em. If you look up Smack 'em, Whack 'em, the whole thing, between each match, they show the Bushwhackers with Lord Alfred Hayes. They're trying to put together this house. It's absolutely hysterical. You also have Yokozuna's on that videotape at a hibachi restaurant, eating all kinds of food. It's a blast.
Mate, here's another one. The one when we went to buy a present for our mother's birthday, and we went to what do they call shops now where they sell, toys, sexual toys and all that. What are those shops called?
The ambiance or places like that. Absolutely, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and we chose a negligee, and our mum was 280 pounds. And it was a see-through one. And Butcher's got his head in there. Look at me. He says, and he's got his head in between it, inside it. He says, Mama looked nice in this, and we'd already told the people she's 280 pounds. That was great. That was the best.
I got to ask you, too. You mentioned the work with the Rougeau brothers, and you're right. You guys, the first 6 to 9 months with the Rougeau brothers. But the biggest win you really ever had, a big one, was at WrestleMania 5. In fact, it was the only time you guys appeared on the main card of a WrestleMania. I know you fought at WrestleMania 9 on the dark end of the pay-per-view in Nevada. But at WrestleMania 5, what did it mean for you guys in your first big pay-per-view with the WF to go over as winners?
That was in Trump Plaza. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so the one you won was at WrestleMania 5 was in Trump Plaza. The only other time you guys were on another WrestleMania was many years later at WrestleMania 9 in Las Vegas, Nevada. But the big one was WrestleMania 5. You guys were on the main card when you beat the Rougeaus. How did that feel to get such a big win, so early on with the company on a big stage like WrestleMania?
To be on the biggest pay-per-view in the world at the time was insane. I'm not talking about the building, the capacity of people watching it live, but being on a pay-per-view that's big around the world. At the time, the sales for pay-per-views was insane. Vince's pay-per-views was insane. And we're in Trump Plaza. Now, the audience there wasn't a hardcore wrestling audience. Nope. It was who in show business. We were at Trump Plaza, and all the film stars were in the front row. And, in the first 3 or 4 rows, it was who in show business.
Yeah.
Vince was drawing that sort of people at the time. And everyone was all dressed up in collars and ties. And, it was a different kind of crowd. People had come there to gamble, and to be known and be seen on a pay-per-view. So that's what I think that Trump Plaza held 8,000.
Yep.
It wasn't a big building, but the show was bought by Trump. Vince and Trump have got a long relationship. And Vince got the pay-per-view, Trump just got the door sales, and of course he got the people in his hotel and to gamble, of course. That's why this was the second pay-per-view he'd done there. He did the year before there too.
Later on in that same year, in 1989, you and Butch were part of one of the greatest tag teams in the Survivor Series history, with Rowdy Piper and Jimmy Superfly Snuka as your teammates. What was it like to team up with Rowdy Piper and Superfly Jimmy Snuka for that Survivor Series pay-per-view?
Mate, well, this is good. Roddy was one of the oldest, apart from Honky Tonk Man. Roddy was the longest person. Dutch Mantel, Roddy Piper, and Honky Tonk Man were the longest people I know in North America. You know, who in USA. Roddy I met in the mid to late 90s, and I've worked mid to late 70s, and I worked against him and Rick Martel for 14 months consecutively. I'm talking about, we had 20, this was in Northwest Championship Wrestling, and we had 22 consecutive sellouts in a row there. And I didn't know this till Roddy told me about 3 months before he died, because he was from Portland, Oregon, and the main town in that territory was Portland. And of course, Jimmy Snuka was there too. He was there when we arrived there, and he just left. He left after we arrived, and he went down to Crockett's in North Carolina. And when we left the Northwest Championship Wrestling in 1980, our next territory was the headquarters for NWA. And Jimmy Snuka was the champion down there with Ray Stevens. They were the world champions. And a week after we were there, we were the Mid-Atlantic champions. They put the other straps on us. I think it was 2 weeks later. So we travel with Jimmy. We travel with Jimmy all the time. You see, he's from the South Pacific. We are too. New Zealand is the southern part of the South Pacific. Above us is, Rarotonga, Tonga, Samoa, Fiji, all those islands. So we travel with Jimmy all the time. So these two guys were our brothers. Roddy was part. We'd known Roddy all that time for 14 months. Worked with him every day, and Jimmy was so great to be in that tag. It was an 8-man tag match, right?
Yeah. Oh, it was an 8-man.
Survivor Series?
Yeah, Survivor Series, and you guys faced off against the Rougeau brothers, Rick Rude, and Mr. Perfect. So, definitely
what opponents.
Unbelievable amount of legends.
What opponents. Rick Rude, he was a master. He just had heat. You know what I mean? His gimmick.
Instant.
He would get heat selling. Selling someone's punch. The people would hate him. And of course, Mr. Perfect. Kurt Hennig, what a guy. God bless the both. Hey, that whole team we're talking about are dead.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, 4 of them. Yeah.
No, they're not. The Rougeau. What did you say? It was the Rougeaus, right?
Yeah, so both of your teammates, Rowdy Piper and Jimmy Superfly Snuka, have passed away, and then 2 of your opponents that night, Rude and Perfect, are both gone. It's sad to think. Now, I wanted to ask you this question. I got a couple questions here, and I really, would love your opinion on these. At WrestleMania 6 in the Toronto Sky Dome, you got 67,000 people. That's a big deal. Vince Jr. made a really interesting decision to have Hulk Hogan lose for the first time on TV, get pinned fairly, cleanly, and put the belt on Ultimate Warrior and make Ultimate Warrior the face of the company. How was that perceived by the boys in the back? How do you guys feel about a guy like Ultimate Warrior, who a lot of people were not comfortable with, being the new face of the company and having Hulk Hogan take a slight step down?
Well, the actual Warrior, God bless him, he wasn't liked too much. He was a chiropractor, and if anyone hurt themselves or, put a disc out or anything, he wouldn't help them. Because he said, if I look after one, I'll be looking after the whole territory. So he, poor guy. What's his first name again?
Jim.
Jim, yeah. I'd known Jim from UWF, Bill Watts. He came in there, and Bill Watts, you know, that's another story. Me telling you a little story about UWF. But I started knowing him from there. And you know, me and Butch got along with him well. But amongst the boys, and that, you know, he hit Hercules Hernandez with a chair. He got 67 stitches. You know, he was pretty careless in the ring. The clotheslines were on the jaw all the time. Rick Rude knocked him out in a Texas town because he clotheslined him on the jaw, and he just got so pissed off with him. So he wasn't right. But Vince, Vince was a bodybuilding freak, as we all know. Look at Vince's body, and I think his wife liked him too. So they wanted to go with Jim Halloway, and they did. And believe it or not, Terry's often told me, Hulk's often told me, the Warrior wanted to go home after 7 or 6 minutes, and Terry says no. The Warrior was blowing up and freaking out, and I think they did about 20 minutes.
Yep.
And the match. And it was a good match. You know, he just had Hulk had to cool him down, and believe it or not, the people bought it, and that was a great match for two baby faces.
It's one of the greatest matches of all time. You know, right around that same time as well, Dusty Rhodes came in. Dusty Rhodes showed up maybe 6 or 7 months after you guys arrived. And Dusty Rhodes at that point was already a legend from the NWA. You know, his time with Crockett, his time down in Florida. He was such a big name. And why do you think, Vince Jr. and Pat Patterson and the creative team decided to? They didn't squash him, but also they put him in polka dots. They gave him a manager that didn't fit. Nothing seemed to work.
That's easy. Dusty was the booker for NWA. Hello?
Yes, sir. I'm still here.
Yeah, Dusty was a booker for NWA, and for the last 6 years, from 84, I think, to 88 or 89, and he'd knocked WWF, the opposition. He would be told by the other promotion by the Crockett's, WWE's, been stealing our talent. They've taken Steamboat. They've taken a lot of talent, from Sergeant Slaughter, from NWA. So they were opposition. And of course, Dusty was the booker for them. So he had to sort of, be a bit rough about WWE or WWF at the time. So when they brought him in, of course, they put the polka dots on him. They tried to make a bit of a joke from him, but it actually backfired. Dusty got over. They gave him the black woman from St. Louis. I forget her name.
Sapphire.
Yep, the people loved her. He was the common man, the plumber, the common man with the black girl in the corner, and she was heavy. And that, but Dusty knew how to get over. He got himself over. He was a booker in Florida. He got himself over strong in Florida. He was a booker in the NWA. Got himself over all over the South, and up the. Well, TBS wasn't so strong up north at the time, but he got himself over everywhere he went.
I wanted to ask you, too, you touched on it. One of the most famous moments in Royal Rumble history is when you were in the ring for 4 seconds. When you whacked your way in, Earthquake took you by the pants and threw you out. Like you said, they showed that all the way through 2018, a long time. When did you find out about that? Did you know about that weeks ahead of time? Or when you got to the arena, they said, hey, you're going to be out there for 4 seconds? And what goes through your mind? Because you're traveling.
That came up to me right before. About 10 minutes before it. We all had our spots where we go out on the sheet, on the running speed. And Pat come up, he says, I want you to march up to the ring, and Earthquake's going to get you there, take you across the other side, dump you out, and you just keep doing what you do, and he's going to dump you out. And I don't know whether he told me to keep marching or not, but of course, knowing it's our gimmick, and of course I didn't get hurt in the ring. When I got into the ring, Earthquake took me the other side, out, over the top. I landed on my feet, and I just kept marching.
That's excellent.
Like every battery, the rabbit. I kept on marching, mate.
I love it.
And that was notorious right up to right up to 280.
Oh yeah.
Vince stopped using that and 280, which pissed me off because I was seen every year from 92 to 280.
Yes, you were. In your time with the WWF, it's the greatest time ever. I don't think anybody would ever tell you different. It's one of the greatest eras of all time. The era that you were a part of with the WWF. What was probably one of your favorite moments or one of the craziest things you saw happen on the road? Because a lot of, the fans, we see what happens in the ring, but we don't get to know what happens on the road or any of the backstage drama. What do you think was one of the crazier things you've ever seen?
Well, there's a lot of wild things I can't really mention on this because it's too wild, but the Warrior and Kerry Von Erich with the now this is third party, I didn't see it, but the limousine driver taking them back to San Francisco from Sacramento. They were using GHB at the time it was legal. You used to take it, supposed to take it before you went to bed at night to burn fat, and that. But if you put carbs on it, it was like Valium. It was like a lot of Valium or muscle relax. It gave you a good high, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the limousine driver, they were taking it back in the limousine when they left Sacramento, and the limousine driver said, "What's that?" And he said, "I've done everything from angel dust, coke, name the drugs. I don't want to go name more." And that, so blah blah blah. So they says, "Well, give us your water. You can put a bit of water in a cup, and they give him a spoon." 15 minutes later, he was swerving on the road, so they told him to pull over, and they pulled him out of the driver's seat and jammed him in the back. And jammed him in the back seat. They had job jamming him in because he was so effed up. And they drove the limo back to San Francisco.
Wow.
That's not it. That's not at all. They found out where the boss lived. They called on the radio in the car where the owner lived, and they found out. And they drove around to his place. They pulled this kid out who was in his valet, in his suit and that, driver suit, and put him on the front lawn. It pooed his pants, shit his pants, and they dumped him on the front. They dumped him on the front lawn there, and they drove that night, drove back to the hotel, and that. And the next morning they left the limo at the airport. Of course, Vince got the call and that, blah, blah, blah. And they had to tell the office that they left the car in the airport. The guy woke up and saw the guy on his lawn, and I don't know what happened, whether he got fired or whatever.
Oh, my gosh. That's crazy. What was...
That's crazy. I'd love to video that, the guy coming out of his front door in the morning and see one of his employees sitting on the front yard, on the front lawn with his pants full of poo.
I can't even imagine.
We've done 30 minutes.
Yeah, no,
no problem. Can we start?
So, what was your favorite venue or city that you ever worked in?
Favorite venue? Okay, I got two, mate. Of course, the biggest one was the 1992 SummerSlam. Was it 91?
No, 92 at Wembley Stadium.
Wembley Stadium. Now, this was the last show in that stadium. They pulled it down after that and built the new one, which is smaller. It was 94,600. And, to fill that arena up, it takes time. It takes about 2 hours. People start coming in 2 hours. So people have been sitting around inside for a long time, and we were first match. So they were dying to see something, right?
Yep.
And here's the match. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Butch and me. There was a whoa, a yay, and a ho. We marched out. The aura in that building was big. God, the crowd was going nuts. We were marching, went into the ring. We went from one rope to another rope, doing our whoa, and Butch whoa, I'm doing the yay, and Duggan's doing the ho. We could have done that the whole night. The crowd, the noise. You know how you listen to the soccer games in England and in Europe, how they're all singing? Well, that's how it was, mate. That's how the crowd was. And then we started the match against the Mountie and the Nasty Boys. And the match was like the noise at the start. That noise never finished till the end of the match.
That's incredible.
It was insane. And, you know, that I'll always remember that. Now, the other one was, the biggest highlight was in the mecca of sports entertainment. From sports and rock and roll and everything, MSG, Madison Square Garden, in the 80s. The last match was a battle royal. And the last person to come out to the ring was Hulk Hogan. Well, when he came out to that ring, Butch could put his mouth in my ear and try to talk to me. I wouldn't heard a word. I didn't hear a word. The hair on my arms was standing. That's how the aura in that building, because the MSG has got great acoustics.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, this was before it was remodeled too, but it was great. And then this was, I say, 89 or maybe, yeah, this was in 89. And Hulkamania was running wild. WrestleMania was running wild. You know, the 80s was a wild time in WWF.
So,
and when Hulk came to that ring, the building exploded.
I have 2 questions left for you here, and I appreciate you taking the time. 2 more questions to go, then we'll be all done for the day here. This happened a little bit after you left. You had mentioned, earlier in the episode about Shawn Michaels. You were not there in 1997 that I know of when the world famous Montreal Screwjob happened. Looking at it and looking at the Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon, were you surprised when that went down? Were you shocked by that, or do you feel like Vince McMahon did the right thing?
Yeah. I don't know, mate. I'm on the fence. I don't know the reasons behind it, mate. See? There's always reasons behind things. I know Brett was supposed to drop it, but he wanted to drop it he wanted to drop it in the States. He didn't want to drop it in his home country. But they thought it would get more heat on Shawn Michaels if he dropped. Shawn Michaels was a heel, right?
Right, big time.
And they would get more heat on Shawn if he dropped it. Brett dropped it in Canada. I think this is my way of thinking. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
From an outside guy. And now I know it. I'd worked with Shawn when he first started. Maybe 84. I worked with Shawn in they brought him into San Antonio. I left, but I've been the booker there. And maybe 84, 85. And they brought him in, and I worked with him then, and I thought, this kid's going to make it. He was magic when he was young. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
That was 84, I think. And he was a baby face then. Now, I'd known Brett. I'd met Brett in 1973 when I worked for his dad at Stampede in 1973. And he was a kid then. And then I worked against Brett. I come back for 6 weeks later in 79, and I actually worked against Brett. He'd started 6 months or a year before. I actually wrestled his dad, him, his brother, and his dad at that time. So I'd known Brett for a long time too. And Brett was a serious worker, a real serious worker.
Last question for you here, and thank you again. We want to, welcome you here anytime with Keon Sports. The last question of the day is probably the easiest one I've asked you yet. How did it feel in 2015 to go into the WWE Hall of Fame?
Butch always says I was a bit rude here, but when they called me up and told me Butch was down under at home, he went back to New Zealand in 92, in 202. When they called me up and said, I said to Mark, whatever his Karana, I said, about bloody time. Now, the funny part is, mate, when I went on social media, all the northern people said, what the hell are they putting the two clowns in television? A lot of people up north didn't know of our earlier. They thought in '88 we started late in life as two comedians. The northern people.
Oh yeah, they didn't know about the sheep herders.
The way Mitch portrayed us with all those cartoons, whack 'em, and as you said, whack 'em and smack 'em. All those little mini videos we did, and that's what they've seen us from. They never saw the blood and guts, and that they didn't know that we started as a tag team in 1966. And with Peter had worked, Butch had worked with and myself had worked with the Rock's grandfather in Australia and New Zealand. And we'd worked against Stu Hart, against Killer Kowalski. None of these people knew that. Killer Kowalski was selling out Madison Square Gardens in the 60s and 70s. They didn't realize we'd wrestled these guys, in the 60s. We used to go across to Australia and work for the American promoter, Barnett, James Barnett. He was the guy that started WCW. Mm-hmm. He was the guy that got Ted Turner to put on wrestling up on the satellite. We worked against him, and he owned Australia at the time, WCW in Australia, from 65 onwards. And Butch and me used to go over there and work against all the Americans. Dewey Robinson, the missing leg. I don't want to go through names, but the Sheik, not the Iron Sheik, the Sheik from Canada.
The original Sheik.
I know, the Indian, the Indian, who was big in Japan, I forget.
Chief J. Strongbow? Wahoo McDaniel?
Huh?
Chief J. Strongbow or Wahoo McDaniel?
Yeah, Strongbow. We worked against a lot of those guys. They brought down, Jim Barnett brought down to Australia, and that. So we've been around, and that they didn't know that. It wasn't until we went in the Hall of Fame and we started mentioning the names that we'd worked with. The Rock's dad. We'd worked with them in New Zealand in the mid-'70s. We'd worked with them in Australia. We'd worked with them in the States. We actually dropped the belts to them in 1980, and we dropped the Mid-Atlantic belts to him and Dewey Robinson, Rocky Johnson. We'd worked with a load of guys. And when we started telling the fans that, then they realized that we weren't new kids on the block. You know what I mean? We had mileage.
Oh, extreme. Well, I want to thank you again for taking the time to speak with us today. Do you have any last words for your fans before we let you go?
No, hey, just all the fans on your sports podcast. Check me out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Bushwacker Luke.
Awesome.
And my website is bushwackerluke.com for merchandise.
Bushwackerluke.com.
I'm back on the road, folks. I'm back on the road. Last week I was in Rhode Island. The week before in Tennessee. This week I'm in Green Bay. So keep a watch out to where I'm going to be in the future. Because I may be in your town and you'll still be able to come and see Bushwacker Luke. Nelly's in the business for 60 years. Yeah, I'm just saying a minute. Been in the business for 58 years and I'm still in the ring. Come and see me.
Well, Luke, if you ever come to Cleveland, Ohio, you have a place to stay on Keon Sports. Sound good?
Okay, mate. Yeah, I work in Ohio a lot. The actual promoter I worked for a lot, Joe Pizza, died last year. It was sad that I used to work around Ohio a lot.
Sounds good, sir. Thank you, and have it.
Like a podcast, mate. Great speaking to you, and all the fans out there. I'll give you a whoa and a yay. Love you guys.
Thank you. Have a good one. So that was Bushwacker Luke of the world famous Bushwhackers. For Keon Sports, I'm Vince McKee. Have a good day. Smack 'em, whack 'em.